Welcome back, everyone. I am Susan Brodie. I am the co-vice president of program for the AAUW of Colorado. And it's my pleasure to introduce our next speakers. There's an accompanying panel, and they will share how-to information about the diversity toolkit and instituting a diversity officer position in your branch or in the state. Melissa Ingram and Jesse Orenberger have led the Diversity and Inclusion Committee for AAUW for a few years, and they will be talking to us, and they will be introducing a panel of 4 members from branches and states throughout the, it's not quite time yet, Kay, so we're just going to be introducing Melissa and Jesse. Thanks. So first of all, I want to mention that Melissa Ingram has been part of the AAUW Inclusion Committee since 2019, and she became the Diversity and Inclusion Toolkit Subcommittee Chair in 2020. Outside of AAUW, Melissa's worked within various universities to educate faculty on inclusive practices for students and staff, and currently she works to design and develop online curricula for postgraduate professionals. Jesse Orenberger has been a part of the AAUW Inclusion and Equity Committee since 2019, working on the Diversity and Inclusion Toolkit. And prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, Jesse also worked with the Boston area AAUW to deliver Work Smart and Start Smart salary negotiation workshops around the city and local universities. Professionally, Jesse works in career services, helping students with their career pursuits. So I'd like to be sure that Melissa and Jesse are here. You can unmute, and Jesse and Melissa, I know you're going to spend a few minutes giving us more details about the toolkit and the officer position, and I want you to go ahead and take it away.
Thank you so much, Susan. I'm just going to share some slides here. Melissa, go ahead.
So thank you so much, everyone, for the warm welcome, the opportunity for Jesse and I to be able to talk to you all today. If we're going with the theme of this conference, I guess the toolkit kind of falls in the how of how we reach diversity and equity goals. So we just wanted to do a brief overview of how to navigate to some of the parts of the toolkit, and then I'll turn this over to Jesse to talk about the order and then this diversity officer and the parts of the toolkit that are especially important for diversity officers. So Jesse, if you could. Thank you. So there are 2 ways to get to the toolkit. The first one is when you're on the main AAUW page, click on the membership tab. And then from the membership tab, you'll see a list, and one of those items on the list is governance and tools. Once you click on governance and tools, so once you click on governance and tools, you'll see the AAUW page. The other way to get to it is if you just hit the search feature, so that little magnifying glass icon. Next slide, please. Then you can type in DEI toolkit. From there, either way that you choose to access the toolkit, you'll get this governance and tools page. And from the governance and tools page, the second main header is the diversity, equity, and inclusion toolkit. So once you click on that, you'll see a list of toolkit resources. And here's where I'll turn this over to Jesse.
Thanks, Melissa. So within the toolkit resources, there's several different sections that you might want to check out as a diversity officer to help you design activities, do more research, and we have linked to a number of external resources as well. The first is the diversity structure and planning section. This also gives an overview of what you might think about when designing diversity plan. So it gives you steps to walk through with your chapter to identify areas that you want to make improvements on. So the first part of working on a diversity plan is to assess where you are currently, and then decide what changes you want to make, and then set realistic goals for how to achieve those changes. So within this diversity structure and planning section, we have both a description of the diversity officer sort of job description, but also the diversity structure and planning activities that you can take your branch through. Within that, you can see the sections for activities with the community, as well as things that you should think about beforehand, before starting with the large group. We also have a section on getting started with difficult conversations. As you get deeper into the DEI work, it can bring up a lot of emotions for folks within your chapters for varying reasons, and being prepared to understand what might come up, how to address what might come up, and also to understand your own style of communication and conflict management. We have lots of resources for that in this section. We also have a whole section on key terms and concepts. This is a great resource because not everybody is familiar with all the terms that get used in this space. So what is diversity? What is inclusion? What are the actual definitions there? What's the difference between diversity and inclusion? And Melissa's going to mention a webinar we'll be holding later about that, but there are some resources here in the key terms and concepts to help give you a baseline understanding of those terms. And then with each term, we have compiled a list of resources, both books, websites, activities for both students and related to the workplace and adults, videos, etc. So you can take a look through those and choose the ones that you like. There's so many, so it's lots of opportunity to explore, but you can pick the ones that you would like, pick the activities that work for you, and implement those in your chapter. And then we also have a section on dimensions of diversity and identity. So when we think about the word diversity, what do we actually mean? And what are the different dimensions of diversity? It's historically, diversity is used to describe anything that differentiates groups, such as ethnicity and gender. But there's lots of different dimensions that you might also not think about, such as age or education or parental status. And all of those can impact the way that folks interact with one another and the accessibility of different events for different groups of people. Within each section, we designed definitions of how each dimension of diversity contributes to diversity, but then each dimension of diversity, we've also listed a number of resources broken down again by print, website, video, and activities to help folks understand how these particular dimensions of diversity might impact someone as they move through the world. Melissa, do you want to talk about the next workshop and fall topics?
Awesome. Thank you, Jessie. So what we tried to do with the toolkit is to meet everyone where they are. We realize that all branches are in different locations in terms of these diversity, equity, and inclusion conversations. So our webinars have been focused on the building blocks of what we think is important in the order that we think it's important. So hopefully a lot of you were able to attend Jessie's last webinar and having difficult conversations. If not, the recording is out there. It's a fantastic resource to just start some of these DEI conversations if you haven't already. The webinar before that was specifically aimed at diversity officers and how to actually start a program with community agreements. Our next webinar in June is going to cover those key terms and concepts that Jessie highlighted. So the webinar is entitled Understanding the Difference Between Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And again, this is a baseline conversation for all chapters and states to hopefully start with the same terminology or understanding of the terminology before they can have more in-depth conversations on DEI. But based on what you in the field wanted, our fall 2021 and spring 2022 topics are going to include understanding implicit and unconscious bias, creating inclusive spaces, allyship, that intersectionality discussion that Jessie brought up in terms of dimensions of diversity. And we're also going to talk a lot about social justice. We realize that's a hot topic and has been, as Kim said, in the past 14 months. So we want to explore these topics that are meaningful to all of you. Now with that, next slide, please. These four wonderful women have helped shape some of these topics and helped get together in a community of practice the state and chapter or state and branch diversity officers. So with that, I would like to introduce Dr. Kay Brocado from Mississippi, Dr. Linda Carpenter from Florida, Ms. Cindy Shanahan from Virginia, and Ms. Suzanne Young Mercer from New York. These wonderful women have been where you diversity officers are now and where you all are just in general in terms of DEI conversations. And they have a lot to share in terms of their growing experiences and how they've been able to help their branches and their states foster more inclusive spaces. So with that, I will turn it over to the panel.
I'm just going to kick in here just a little bit to organize just a little bit. Because we didn't really give you too much of an introduction, please, all of you, feel free that as you tell your stories, you kind of share a little bit about your background and a little bit about your branch and state. So Dr. Brocado, you're first. Kay, if you'll start out, we'll come to each one of you in order. And for those of you in the audience, please be noting what questions you have and what you might want to find out about. So when we're done, you'll be able to put in the Q&A questions you have for the panelists. Okay, Kay.
Thank you, Susan. I am delighted to be here. My name is Kay Brocado, and I am the state president for AAUW Mississippi. And I've prepared a few slides to show you what I learned from the AAUW Diversity and Inclusion Toolkit by being one of the authors back in 2015 all the way through 2017. And what I learned from the good people of our committee, we were a task force at the time, was that I really have a lot of value because I have so many identities. So this is who I am. And my first slide of who I am is I'm a mom. These are all my people. And I'm a sister, an aunt. And I have an international family and a multi-ethnic family. I'm a spiritual person, and that includes my body and my mind. I am as the president of AAUW Mississippi, working actively on the last state in the country to move our equal pay policy into existence. Actually, Mississippi has no equal pay policy at the moment, and we are the last state. So this slide shows what we're doing this year and various pictures around the state of what our branch looks like and how we operate. In addition to that work, I'm also quite active in other groups. And so I have to be very careful because I live in the rural South. And when I get super active, it could bring some scary attention to me and my family. So sometimes I have to step forward and step back in my activist work. But these are some photographs of my work around Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia. And then I am also an associate professor of education foundations, and I work on a pedagogy called studio-based learning and design thinking. And as as I understand more and more about the world around me, I want to always be curious. And so AAUW Mississippi is a vehicle for me as the president to be curious about what it means to truly, truly embrace inclusivity, embrace access, allow power to really go to those who don't have it. So in general, that's who I am. Susan, would you like me to talk further about Mississippi? Or
Well, just
that's my...
maybe a little bit about how it's worked. Just you've got a couple more minutes about the process of your diversity program in Mississippi. How far along are you?
So our process in Mississippi started a little differently. We began as co-presidents, myself and Dr. Corinne Anderson. And Dr. Corinne Anderson was a former provost of Tougaloo College, which is all-female African-American HBCU. And she became a co-president and I became her vice president for programs. And the two of us about 10 years ago said, we're going to attack it from the top, the middle, the side, the roots, and we started partnering with every HBCU we could find within our state borders, every private nonprofit within our state borders that was serious about work to empower primarily African-American people in the state of Mississippi, but also international people as well. And so this was well before the atrocities that are going on right now in our country. And so as we embraced those groups and began to see what similarities we had in terms of access to equity, we met a lot of resistance. We also met a lot of embrace. So in a nutshell, what we did was not appoint a diversity inclusion officer, but the two of us grabbed the proverbial bull by the horns and went at it in a really sort of blanket way. And we're probably now to the place where we're ready to have an officer that is more strategic about how to do this work.
Perfect. That's exactly what I wanted to hear, is you are really moving forward in a very unique way. And I know we'll have some questions about how that's gone for you. I'm going to go to Dr. Carpenter. Linda, are you ready to share about what happened in Florida?
I am. Thank you so much. I am Linda Carpenter. I'm from the Lake Sumter branch in the Villages, Florida. I am currently the co-chair of our Diversity and Inclusion Committee. And I was the person who facilitated our development process, the process whereby we developed our branch diversity plan. We did that back in 2018 and used the toolkit that was available at the time. I've spoken in some detail about our process at a webinar that many of you folks may have seen. If you haven't, I would urge you to do so. It's on the AAUW national site. So I'm not going to repeat that now, but I will talk about some of the outcomes of our diversity planning process to kind of give you an idea of where this can go. The first and most immediate outcome was that our board approved the report from our planning committee, including all 15 action steps, and the recommendation that they establish a standing committee for diversity and inclusion. So they did. At the beginning, we were very much focused on enhancing and improving our members' awareness of diversity issues. I should back up a little bit. We are a branch of about 130 women. We are retired, so we're old. We've been around a while, and we are white. We live in a largely white community in a state that, in some ways, is unreconstructed South. I don't know that our members ever really thought about diversity much because, gee, why would they? So we were edging into the topic. We were sort of easing into it a little bit. And what we did initially, we hosted an international food tasting and dance performance, sort of highlighting that there are people different than us in the world. We elaborated our branch diversity policy. We have that published every month in our branch newsletter. For the first 2 years after we were established, we instituted in our newsletter Heritage Month columns so that people would see a background history about various diversities. The emphasis was clearly on the diversity among us because we weren't real sure how far we could push our membership in the direction we thought they ought to go. So we were kind of happy and edging along toward more serious conversations when George Floyd was murdered last summer. And because we had been in existence for 2 years at that point, we were really positioned to very quickly develop and offer programming that would allow people to address the grief that many of us were feeling and to very directly address and confront racism, which many of our members were just then coming to see existed. As a function of our committee, because we were meeting on Zoom, we were a mechanism for keeping the branch together, for keeping people connected. But because of our programs that we developed, a racism discussion series that is ongoing, we will have session number 9 next week on systemic racism and voting rights. We also developed and changed our monthly column in the newsletter from Heritage Month to Great Reads about diversity. And so our committee is very actively reading. We actively read and recommend the books that we think will help our members in their own journey toward anti-racism. We have discovered that our committee is central to advancing the branch strategic plan, specifically in terms of community outreach, branding and recognition, collaboration with other groups. And because we were created kind of organically, we are in a position to encourage the branch to continuously look at the world through a diversity lens. Let me comment very quickly. Susan, do I have another minute? Okay. I volunteered to facilitate the planning process and tried to step back from not chairing the committee, and that didn't work. So the importance of a facilitator for your planning process cannot be overemphasized. You need someone who is going to keep the process moving forward, the decision making and the discussion open and unthreatening, and a very safe place. As Jessie was commenting, you're going to be talking about things that people can get a little hot under the collar about. And so you need to create that safe environment. Once you've done that, it's contagious and it spills over to your branch, which becomes more inclusive and more of a magnet for further diversity. So I wish you all enormous good luck and good fortune as you develop your own diversity plans. Please get in touch with us. I will put our diversity committee email in the chat. if we can be of help to you in any way as you pursue your own process. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you so much. I did want to say that if you want to contact these people, also know that there's information about these speakers in the bio that I sent you in the email about this event. So if you'd like to find out more about them, you have that accessibility. I wanted to just comment that you mentioned one thing, that you kind of allowing it to happen organically, and Kay's kind of notion was she's kind of going organically. So it's almost sounding like a time frame isn't really useful in this process. It's very hard to know how it's going to go next. So I'm going to go along to Cindy Shanahan, who's from the Virginia, but also is serving as the inclusion chair, the DEI chair for AAUW Virginia, but you also do some things with regard to from AAUW standpoint. So let us know how it's working for you.
Great. Well, thank you. And thank you so very much for having us. It's been wonderful. I've been on with you for the whole program so far, and it's connecting so well and bringing back so many memories for me, because this was essentially the same way that Virginia started. About 2 years ago, one of our state conferences was completely about diversity, equity, and inclusion, much like this one. And we did not have a diversity, equity, and inclusion officer at that time. I was serving as the state membership chair. I am in Virginia. I am currently the diversity, equity, and inclusion chair in the state of Virginia. And also, as Susan indicated, I've coordinated across the nation the diversity, equity, and inclusion chairs in each of the state, or representatives in the states that are interested and have diversity roles throughout the countries, which has been fascinating and wonderful. And we're very happy to have Eileen joining us. So once we got through the first conference, similar to the conference that you're having now, our board also decided that we needed a diversity, equity, and inclusion chair. And I was invited, since I was rolling out of the membership committee chair, to take that position on, which I was delighted to do, because I clearly saw the intersection of membership and diversity, equity, and inclusion. One of the things that we decided at that time was that it was going to be a chair position, which for us in the state of Virginia is an appointed position, not an elected position. At that time, I created in each of our branches, and we have over 20 branches in Virginia, what I was calling a point of contact. At that time, not every branch was quite ready for this. Some were, and some had already moved along quite a far way in diversity, equity, and inclusion, and others really didn't know what it was about. So point of contact for us was a little less intimidating than calling it a chair position. It's just semantics, really. So we met in September, and each of the branches identified what they were going to do in their community based on what the community demographics were and what their branch members were interested in, what they would be doing about diversity, equity, and inclusion programming during the year. And then in April, we met again to discuss how it went, what resources and support they needed over the summer. And we continue to do that twice a year Zoom meetings, which have really worked out well. We really focused on the mission, vision, and values of AAUW as the undergirding of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And at the branch level, what the community demographics look like, what the branch members were interested in, and kind of developed in that way. We are finding that book groups and movie groups are very important to forwarding this process, and we heard that from a number of other people as well. I think our key success factors were that our state board was very supportive of this. As a matter of fact, last fall, we did an exercise which I think was really awesome. Each of the elected officers and appointed officers were asked to pull together and share how they were going to support diversity, equity, and inclusion through their particular chair position. So for instance, how was membership going to support diversity, equity, and inclusion? How were our CU partner chair going to support diversity, equity, and inclusion? And we had a really robust conversation about this. So really at the highest level, both at the state and at the branches, having support for diversity, equity, and inclusion is critical. We have also got a constant focus on it. There is no meeting that goes by at the state level that does not have at least one or two or the whole process on diversity, equity, and inclusion ideas. So that has been also very important. And at the branch level, getting commitment for focus has been key as well. So we're continuing to move forward. Each branch is still at a different place from the other ones, and they're very excited, really sharing the programming from branch to branch, and having these cohesive meetings twice a year has been critical. So I hope that helps and can guide you a little bit on a way that might be successful for you as well.
Terrific, Cindy. Thank you for sharing all of those insights, and perhaps we can ask what some of your general responses have been from all of the different states you've been in connection with. I particularly like the bottom-up versus top-down model. Neither one is better or best, but it could be one of the ways that your state goes, or your branch. Suzanne, glad to meet you. Glad to have you here with us today. Please share with us about your experience in New York State and anything from your branch as well.
So thank you so much for having me. This has been, I've been participating from the very beginning. So your keynote speaker, and Ken always, all of this is very enlightening. And then listening to my fellow diversity champions, I realized in New York State, although, we've been around for, we've been in it for a while, I'm not quite as advanced. I think primarily because, so let me begin. So I came to AAUW through the president of our Rockland branch. And I came to it at a diversity brunch, which Rockland has had. We celebrated our 62nd diversity brunch this past February.
Oh my goodness.
So we've been in the diversity, we've been doing this for a while, and Rockland has been very successful at it. Our branch is probably one of several diverse branches in the state. And our state has about, when I first joined, it was 30 something. Now we're down to 26 branches. And so that's how I got involved in AAUW. And then of course, as we all know, in a lot of places, you come in as a member, and then, there's leadership positions, or, people want to be members, but they don't want to do the work. And so I was the program person, so I had to put together programs. So diversity, I became the diversity programmer, and we had it every February. It's always the last Saturday in February. Then, I threw me into that. Then I became, we need a president. So then I became the president of the Rockland branch. And so, that's, within the first 3 years of being in AAUW, I'm programming, I'm president, I'm doing all this stuff. And then I became, I was nominated as emerging leader, and, the president of the state said, oh, well, she could be the diversity person for the state. And I'm like, okay, this is all very exciting. I'm like, I'm being recognized. I'm getting old and I'm being recognized. So I'm like, good, I'm sure I can do this. It seems like it's easy to do, but not really. So, over the course of time, I tried to model what we did in Rockland, reaching out to the branches in the state and trying to see what they were doing for diversity. Some of them were doing stuff, some of them weren't. Lots of it was around the February, because that's when everybody Black History Month. And so this is where we were going. And, it's been, I want to say that because of all of the stuff that has been happening with the diversity toolkit and all of the uprising that has brought, the systematic nature of racism in this country to light, that it's, that I've come to realize what is more needed in the state and how we're supposed to move forward with this. Primarily because what I realize is that first of all, I need a committee, which most of everything I've been doing pretty solo, pulling somebody here from there. You need a committee to begin, right? You can't do anything without a committee. And what I've come to and have pulled together recently is the fact that I'm going to try to create my committee from branch members, right? Reaching out to the branches, getting, if they have a diversity person, pulling them onto my committee, because I can't come up with all what diversity is about is bringing everybody to the table so we can talk about what we think is gonna work. You can't find out what's gonna work if you don't have a committee. So I know I'm like running over and stuff. So so that really needs to be it. I think we can't move forward without a committee. You have to, diversity has to be at the center of what it is you're trying to do, because ideas and meshing and hashing out what it is we want to see our branch, our state to be, is going to happen with input from all sectors of the population. So I'm going to end it there.
Okay. Anybody want to add to, we've got a couple of more minutes to present before we go to Q&A. Kay, would you like to, just any more, you got a little shortchanged on time. So if you want to add a few more comments, you're welcome to do that. And then I will begin to pull questions from the Q&A that have come in, and there aren't that many right now. So Kay, what else would you share?
Well, I would share a huge thank you to our AAUW Diversity and Inclusion. Melissa and Jesse gave a presentation about our living document, the Diversity and Inclusion Toolkit. And, it was living when I became the task force chair for AAUW. And we saw that task force through to standing committee. And it took us about 4 or 5 years to take a working group to a task force, to a committee at the national level. And the toolkit was already living at that time, and we brought it into a new generation. And the current committee under Melissa and Jesse and the other great leaders that have been a part of creating the toolkit are bringing it even further. But this piece, I think, helped us in Mississippi, and especially me, to think about what our goal was. And I think it's still in the toolkit. If it's not, we can share it, however. But the far right column talks about seeking and inclusive. And that's an organization that has current insiders who are actively recruiting newcomers, and they value diversity. The insiders are willing to change themselves and the culture to make room for new people with diverse perspectives, ideas, and ways of working together. And that is kind of where we are currently, where I'm finding a lot of the groups I work with are primarily African-American. The African-American women in those groups are very boldly saying, this work of inclusivity and unity is not for Black women. We've been including people forever. Black women embrace. Now we need you guys to understand that we'll work beside you, but you need to be out front taking those risks and saying, how do we embrace the margins, and how do we give the margins the center and move ourselves to the margin? And that's hard work. So, I think what I'm proud of is these little red sets of text that are our new policy for AAUW. Kimberly Churches, bless her heart, has worked her fingers to the bone. That's a great Southern statement. It's part of one of my identities. I'm a Southern girl. I was born and raised in Memphis, Tennessee. I was born 4 days before Martin Luther King Jr.'s assassination, 2 blocks away from the Lorraine Motel where he was standing when his spirit left this universe. My little baby body was in the infant nursery of the hospital 2 blocks away from that. It impacted my entire growing up years. And so to be Southern and to say about AAUW, bless our hearts for picking up the gauntlet and the torch of unity and diversity and carrying it forward. And Kimberly and Shannon Wolf and Angela Cooper and all those folks at that national level who were Gloria in charge of scholarships, just fantastic work. And if you're looking for an activity, look at the policy changes and go on a vocab study. My original identity as a professional was as an English teacher, and you can do a little vocab study. This little activity here, we made it up in our state. We used it once or twice, and we'll use it again. Make your own up. But it allows for conversation, and it's just a set of papers. And so to wrap up, I will share any of this anytime.
Thank you, Kay. Good info. Well, we do have some questions. Let me go ahead and begin the process of doling them out to the panel. But one of them was, when you do speak, maybe you could give a little more personal information. You didn't get a lot of intro in terms of your background and where you come from and maybe your education background and what you've done before. So if you'd like to add some of that, welcome to it. I have one question in the chat, which says, do you have any information, or can you share briefly about the racial makeup of your state? So I'm going to shoot to Suzanne maybe first, because boy, is there a more diverse state than New York?
So the state is, if you're, I guess, because I'm the whole, west, east, whatever. So if you're in New York City and the closer surrounding areas to New York City, the state is very, very diverse. But the further out you go towards Canada, towards Pennsylvania side and stuff, that part of the state is much more white. So trying to get, and trying to find a neutral place for all of us to meet is, because the other thing I know, Colorado is a very big state as well. We have members who, if they had to travel from Buffalo to New York City, would be traveling like hours and hours to get there. So, there's a lot going on in New York. Yeah.
Good point. One of the other questions, which kind of dovetails into this, is, have you noticed, with all of this focus that you have done on diversity, is your branch more diverse than it has been, or has there been a change in the diversity within your branch itself?
We've been fortunate that we have a good population of African Americans. We're still a primarily white branch, but we absolutely have African Americans. We have a Vietnamese member. We have Hispanic. I'm sorry if that's not the word. It's Latino members. I'm sorry, we're going back in time. So there's lots of, we have lots of, because Rockland itself is a very diverse community. There's, that's true of Rockland.
Okay.
Susan,
Cindy,
what we've said in Virginia is that we want to create branches that are the same as the diversity of the community. So I just spoke with a branch that has, their demographics are primarily white. and the next largest demographic area is Asian. And then if you go to a different area, that will not be the demographic at all. So you really have to think about the demographic of your community rather than the demographic of the whole state, because I think diversity is local. You know, we want to think about it in a big term, but creating diversity in your branch, you can only do really what your community reflects. Now you can work on reflecting your community differently as another issue, but if you're trying to get the demographics of your branch to be the same as the demographics in your community, then I would say that's a really successful program.
And that's a place to start, is what I'm hearing you say too, is
yes,
it's not to try to go to mega diversity when you're in a community that's not necessarily like that. Linda, what were you going to share?
That was a huge challenge for us. And we talked about that a lot. And in our planning committee, the process took us a really long time. We met over a period of months rather than a 3-hour workshop that's recommended in the toolkit. And that worked for us. It really developed an environment and it was good for us. But we talked a lot about what is diversity and what is inclusion and how do they relate to each other? And gee whiz, you know, how do we diversify a group of old white women when there are no people of color around? So we had to talk about other dimensions of diversity. Yeah. So the conversations were very, very rich. I think Cindy's absolutely correct. You can't be building a plan that has nothing to do with the reality of where you are. But to answer your question, Susan, we have started to see more women of color join the branch. Now, don't get carried away. I'm not talking about a flood. Like Suzanne, I can say, okay, we've got 3 women who are Black and 2 Asians, and I hate doing that kind of a count. But it brings me back to the relationship between diversity and inclusion. And I think that the graphic, the chart that Kay showed is really, really helpful in that way. The more inclusive and welcoming your branch is, the more likely people will want to join you.
And Linda, thanks for bringing, because Jesse also made a note in the chat that that's available online. That's part of the toolkit. So that is a useful, we had another question. Kay, I'll get back to you too, is okay. How do you measure how you're doing? How do you measure a baseline of how diverse your community is in the first place? So I don't know if we want to get caught up in statistics at the beginning, because it's kind of a personal thing, but there is an element of how do we know what we're doing and how we're moving forward and how well we're doing. So there is.
We have to do statistics. We have to do statistics, Susan, because we are an educated group of women. Yeah. And so when Linda says, how do I get at this when I'm around a bunch of white people? Well, the first thing you do is you go in that toolkit, you get that identity wheel out, and you figure out, okay, so we're all white, but are we all the same religion? So what do we know about the marginalized religions and those that are in the center? And how do we flip that feeling of power and access? But what's really important is the why. Why do we need to look at the statistics of our community and reflect that in our civic organization? And I'm going to say something really simple, and I want you to think about this. It's because the children are our future, and the children are watching. All right, so the children are watching these groups grow. And if you continue to grow them in a way that is very monocultural, all Baptist people, all white ladies with brown hair, all men, you will continue to show the children that our future looks monocultural. And we know better. We know better. And when we know better, we have to do better. So statistically speaking, we might not get there, but we're going to get there 2 and 3 and 4 at a time. That's one way we're going to get there. The other way we're going to get there is by looking at the variety of ways we can be diverse besides ethnicity, keeping always in mind that it is visible. So, diversity in skin tone is one thing, but it's really very
Okay.
it's really
Yeah.
very easy to do it when it's visible.
Good point, Kay. Good ideas. And I do like the notion that you said, go back to the toolkit. That's what it's there for. If you have a question about, gee, how do I do this? Or how are people, the toolkit has a tremendous amount of resources about that. And you may forget from time to time if you haven't checked recently, but I do remember that identity wheel. So Linda, you had one thing to say.
Yeah,
about that.
I just picking up on the toolkit. There's a lot in there, and you probably got that sense when Jessie was whipping through it. Take some time. If you're technophobic, you can't break it. Ram around in the toolkit. See where things are. Think about what those things, how they might be useful to you in programming and awareness building and whatever. But go to the toolkit. It is an amazing resource that is so rich. With our racism discussion series, we've been out there reinventing the wheel, trying to come up with resources to support each of our discussion topics. It's there, folks. So I can't encourage you enough to use that toolkit. It's just a priceless gift.
Thank you, Linda. That's a great comment. We have about 3 more minutes of the Q&A time that we'd allotted for this, and we do have one more question, but I'm not sure I want to go there. We have a gentleman on the call who is international in our. He happens to live in Colorado right now and wonders how we do with regard to diversity, with regard to how does AAUW incorporate international diversity? And I'd have to say, do we have anybody? I don't want to spend too much on this.
I can speak a little bit about
just
that.
a little bit to that, Kate. I don't
teeny real quick. Our convention was in March at the end, and we find speakers who are doing great things in Mississippi, who highlight the greatness that are Mississippi women. So we found a doctor who is a pediatrician, and our theme was health, hope, and her. And so in the health session of our convention, a Filipino doctor was Veronica Wiley, gave us a great presentation about her training in the Philippines and her internship, and then how she brought all of that international learning and understanding to the state of Mississippi. We have lots of international people, but they're not as visible as that African-American Caucasian population. In my town, it's a university town, so I can find them. Yeah. But we go into the world and find international people to show that world to children, because that's what we want to see.
Good point. We do. You go to the resources you've got that have international connections, because there's certainly areas of all kinds of leadership and all kinds of things that are internationally based. I want to give Melissa and Jessie a moment here to recap. Melissa, do you have anything you want to kind of pull together our panel's discussion? What do you think about how we've covered what is possible out there with diversity, with the toolkit and with the officer position?
I think that this has been a great experience, for all of us. And it's so helpful and beneficial for us at the national level to hear what is going on at the states and at the branch level, because we want to make sure that what we're doing is beneficial for all of you. So we love the positive feedback about the toolkit. We also love the areas for improvement about the toolkit, because we want to make sure that we meet your needs. So I think overall, I learned so much talking with all of you and listening with all of you, especially on ways that we can better help pull all of us together for our common goals of becoming more equitable and more inclusive in just our daily lives. So thank you for everyone having done this. Jesse? Oh, sorry, go ahead, Susan.
Oh, I was just going to add to that, just so people know, if this has felt a little like a fire hose, this is like for those of us in Colorado who have really not gotten too far along this path of diversity officers and toolkits. This will be recorded. This is being recorded as we speak, and it will be posted on YouTube. We have an AAUW Colorado YouTube channel. So if you are hoping to say, boy, review some of this or hear some of this or remember who these 4 panelists were, please feel free to watch for that. You can go on our website, AAUW in Colorado, and connect with this program. So we're just about to come to the end of this one. And Jesse, I want to give you a chance just to say a couple more words just to finalize. I want to thank all of the panelists for being here today. You took out some of your East Coast daylight saving time to come to Colorado, and we appreciate it. And so Jesse, anything else?
Oh, I'll just echo what Melissa said. This was educational for me as well. I took a full page of notes, areas for improvement for the toolkit. So Melissa and I are going to get typing away and adding to the toolkit. It's an ever evolving piece of the website. So we're really excited about this.
Well, thank you for that. Thank you for continuing to grow and develop your program. I'm going to turn this over now to Paula. We are not taking a break between this session and our next